Welcome to Trina Talk. This is the podcast where guests share their stories of pursuing their passions, living a fulfilled life, and empowering others. Each week, I talk with inspiring leaders, business owners, and people with amazing stories from around the world in unscripted conversations as they share their successes and failures. This podcast is all about empowering you to keep striving in your personal and professional life. I am your host, Trina L. Martin. Hey, welcome to another episode. If you're listening, go ahead and go out and subscribe so that you won't miss any future episodes. Also, if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. That way we can move up in the rankings and other people can find the show and be impacted and inspired just like you. Are you a woman of color in tech who feels stuck because you don't see people who look like you? You lack support from someone who truly understands your journey, and you want to overcome the obstacles that you're facing in the tech industry? If you want to elevate your pay, become a leader at your company, and be noticed by colleagues and executives to advance in your career, then Tech Trifecta is for you. It's my 3-month coaching program, and it's now open. I'm only accepting a limited number of people to the program, so apply today. Apply at tlmintl.link/Tech Trifecta. My guest this week is Dr. Steve Yacovelli, also known as the Gay Leadership Dude. Steve is the owner and principal of TopDog Learning Group, a learning and development, leadership, change management, and diversity and inclusion consulting firm based in Orlando, Florida, with affiliates across the globe. Steve is also an author and speaker. His latest book, Pride Leadership: Strategies for the LGBTQ plus leader to be the king or queen of their jungle, came out in June of 2019. With over 25 years of experience in leadership, strategy, organizational learning, and communication, Steve is a rare breed of professional that understands the power of using theory and applying it to corporate settings to achieve business results. Oh, and he's quite fond of dogs too. Hi, Steve. Welcome to Trina Talk.
Hello, Trina. So excited to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you. You are very interesting, but how I always start off the interview is I ask my guests to tell the listeners who they are and what made you the Steve that you are today.
Ooh, I like that. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Steve Yacovelli, pronouns he, him, and his. I am the owner and principal of TopDog Learning Group. We are a boutique learning development, change management, and leadership consulting firm that focuses a lot on diversity and inclusion based in Orlando, but we kind of go all over the world. And I'm also known as the Gay Leadership Dude. So there's that whole trademark R on that title as well. And I would say there's a lot of wonderful contributing factors to what's made Steve at this day and age. But I would obviously, like so many people, cite those who are in my family, but it's not just the biological, it's the family I've created over the years, have all had wonderful influences and supported me on my journey on this wonderful life.
Wow. Very interesting. And what I like about you is the fact that you have this learning and development company and leadership. And, that's kind of my passion as well. But, you said you started your business while being totally authentic. What exactly does that mean?
When you look at some of the latest research in leadership, those leaders who are their authentic selves in the workplace are much more successful, and that can be taken in a whole bunch of different ways. But for me, I've always been out since I started going into the professional world some 3 years ago. I'm just kidding. I'm a bit older than that, but ish. No, it's been about 28 years I've been in the professional space, and it's been about as long as I've known my authentic self. And I think for all of us listening, that power of being your authentic self within the workplace and beyond cannot be underestimated. And I think we all should be our authentic selves in that workplace.
I love that. And the reason why I started that question out is because My space is advocating for women of color in tech, because that's where my, life started. And you're so right. Just showing up as your authentic self. And you probably can relate to this by being a gay man, but by being a woman of color, especially a Black woman of color, I wear many faces, right? And a lot of people don't know this and understand this, but there's the Trina that may step into the office. There's the Trina that's, in her own business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, it gets exhausting. It gets exhausting when you're trying to think about, okay, I'm here, so I got to be this way, and it goes to, and I always tell people this because, the Black female gets the bad rap, right? Because it's always she's the angry Black woman, or she this, she's that. So I really like the fact that you say showing up your authentic self. So tell us about your journey as far as starting your business, showing up your authentic self, and the things that you went through and that you had to overcome.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And side note, I love how you noted that we all wear those different hats. And I think it's, understanding the context on where we lead with one versus the other, but always remaining true to every single hat that we're wearing. I think that's true authenticity at its finest. I actually started TopDog Learning Group as a part-time side hustle back in the early 00s with a colleague while I was still at Disney Cruise Line. So she approached me. We were both in like internal leadership consulting, basically. And she approached me and said, we should start a business. I'm like, we already have a job. And she's like, no, we'll kind of do this side thing. Like, oh, okay, well, we talked about it. And then we took it to our senior VP of HR, just in full disclosure, and just said, is this okay? And she said, don't use Disney stuff. Don't use Disney time. Have at it, friends. We're like, woohoo. So we started this side hustle. We met with a couple clients here and there. It was more of an excuse to drink some wine once a week and pretend to do training stuff. So anyway, flash forward, things progressed, and my friend continues up the Disney food chain. She became a quite a high up executive over in Burbank. And I kind of went through a couple different organizations, ended up, while I was getting my doctorate, I found myself at IBM for a while. I was a professor for like a hot minute, but we still had the side hustle there. And I was a global head of leadership for a large manufacturing company. And I walked in one day, almost 2 years into this experience. And it was one of those, Steve, this isn't working out. I'm like, what? This is a 90-day conversation, not a 18-ish months where you just gave me a 5 out of 5 on my mid-year review kind of conversation. So Florida being a right to work state, to this day, I still have no formal clue why, but it led me down this path. I'm like, well, what do I do now? And so as it turned out, the same friend, Ruth, she calls me and she's like, hey, I need to have dinner with you because I have some news. I'm like, well, funny, I have some news for you. And she came over to dinner, and my husband made us a nice meal. And she's like, well, I'm moving to Paris for 3 years to run Disney University. I said, well, I got fired yesterday and I have no idea why. And she's like, well, come with me. I'm like, what? She's like, come with me. And you speak French, you can help my dog settle in for the week. So be the puppy au pair. And so my husband's just kind of listening to us, eating his food. And he's like, look, why don't you go for a couple months, figure your stuff out, and I'll come collect you. I'm like, okay. So I moved to Paris for a couple months. And at that time is when I really had one of those beautiful sabbatical aha moments. And I'm sitting at a cafe, and I look up at this sign, and if anyone here has ever been to France, that basically like the AT&T equivalent is l'orange, L''orange. And they have this big square, like orange square is their logo. And I looked up and I said, I have this whole side business infrastructure. I could make this a full-time gig and see what happens. And so that's what I did. Came home, kind of got all this stuff together. And in my perfect sense of timing, in early 2008, when the economy was so amazing, I went out on my own as a business. But knock on wood, it's been pretty much my full-time hustle ever since then. So God, Universe, Buddha, Allah, insert deity of choice here, was clearly kind of guiding me along my path where I should go.
I love that because, it seems like, and it's funny because I didn't get fired, but when you're in a job that you're like hating and you're like, oh, I got to do something else, it's just as bad. But it seems like those moments really push us into what we were meant to do.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. So, tell the listeners what it is that you focus on as far as your learning and your training and development. What are you teaching? Who do you teach? And all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so thankful that when people ask you, are you actually using your degree or degrees? I'm like, yes, I am. It's kind of fun. So my undergrad's in PR and marketing. My master's is in educational policy and leadership. And my doctorate's actually in distance education. And so this is a weird, kind of intersection of my experiences coupled with my learning plus my experiences. But like I said, we do leadership and organizational development, diversity and inclusion, and a sense of belonging in the workplace, and change management, and being resilient in times of change. And primarily, we kind of play around these spaces in a whole bunch of different channels, if you will. We do off the shelf training that we've created. We do customized stuff for clients, both virtual and on site when we could do such things. We do group coaching, one-on-one, straight up consulting services. And we primarily work with large organizations, large Fortune 500s, large not-for-profits, and really focus on both the entry to mid and just under that C-suite of leader within the workplace. And so it could be on things just as straight up leadership. Our area of passion right now is really creating consciously inclusive leaders. So that's been the big focus actually over the last about 4+ years. Is actually part of my book, and really helping people create a space to foster inclusivity and a sense of belonging in the workplace, because it's not just the right thing to do, but studies show time and again, when you're a leader who creates that space for all of the others, you just get better business results, and you make the world a better place. And so that's really where we've been focusing a lot of our energy over the late.
Yes, I'm a retired naval officer, so of course I've led, and it's everyone. And then, like we were talking, my passion is right now women of color in tech, and trying to integrate and make that inclusive as far as women from all different colors, and the pay and all those things that go along with that. So what are you finding when you're working with these big companies and you're going into, because diversity and inclusion is like the thing now, right? It's everybody's like talking about it. It's like, ooh, since this pandemic hit and some of the things that we've experienced, let's all do this thing. Are you finding that companies are really authentic with trying to do that, or is it just the hype for the moment?
Yeah, Trina, that's a gorgeous question. And I think it varies. I'm fairly fortunate when we go into it, it's TopDog Learning Group, but I'll be frank, I don't approach any of our solutions from a learning perspective. It's really change management, which has a learning component in it. It has communication strategy, executive stakeholder strategy, all those good things. And so I can tell pretty early on in the conversations with a client or potential client where their tick box mentality versus want to foster true behavior change. And I'll be honest, we try to shy away from the tick box mentality because that's not our value system. That's not how we roll. But we also know that sometimes that little bit of a journey can be the start of a tipping point for true cultural behavioral shift within a business. And so I think what we've been personally doing is, we had a lot of folks approach us in June of 2020 with George Floyd and all the Black Lives Matter, rightfully so, things happening, where several folks approached us and said, "Can you help?" And we said, "Yes, but are we still going to be here in December? Are we still going to be here in spring 2021? Or are you going to have taken the mantle to continue this work?" And a lot of them kind of looked at us like, "What do you mean by that?" I'm like, again, no tick box mentality. And I'm happy to say that at least the folks that we've been playing with, they've been really good about it. Some a little bit slower than others. Again, we work with a lot of global folks, and some of these big enterprise cultures are hard to shift, especially when they're fragmented around the world and there's different perspectives of what inclusivity means, quote unquote, bunny ears. And so as long as folks are making those strides, I think we feel okay about that. But we also know that some people come into our sessions or our workshops or our virtual things, and they're voluntold to be there.
Right.
Right. And you could just tell. And so, we try to meet people where they're at to show them that, if you think about inclusivity in a business, there's 3 different buckets you're kind of playing with on a continuum. All the way on one side, it's the keep us out of hot water, whatever that looks like in your region. Could be legal reasons, whatever. So there's that side. all the way on the other side is it makes the world a better place. Obviously, I think you and I sit in that camp and we see that value. And kind of in the middle there is, you know what, it's good for business.
Right.
And I always try to approach folks and say, look, you might be voluntold on that other side. You want to keep out of hot water. You might be on the other end and say, you know what, this is good for the world. I said, but I'm going to ask you all to at least hit me in the middle where this is good for your workplace. And we want to start there and see where things progress. And usually I can get people on board there. And, I wouldn't say by the end of the day, if we're doing a day or whatever it looks like, but they've moved even one spot closer to, it makes the world a better place. And that I feel that we've gotten a little bit of headway to kind of help move the needle.
That's great. And that's really amazing because we need businesses and companies that are doing more than just ticking the box, right? We want the true, sincere businesses, because like you said, that's the only way that we can grow and make the world equitable and better for everyone. Not just, okay, so we have this heat, so let's do this until everything dies down and then we'll, be fine. So so when you're going in, how are you received as far as when you're telling them, okay, you know what, this is what you need to do to get yourself going? Are they looking at, because most businesses are like, oh, we're fine.
Yeah. And this is where my white advantage comes into play. And I'll be frank, and my maleness can come into play. But then you throw in, oh wait, by the way, you're a minority because you're gay. Oh, okay. And so it's this weird, and I hate that this is true. However, it works. The message can be the same from like 20 different of us, but people will listen to the one that they want. Right. And so, we kind of use that to our advantage at TopDog Learning Group. I mean, we are a diverse group, but we really tried to help meet folks along and kind of move them forward. And some of them look at me like, what's this white dude talking about diversity? So and that's fine. We start that conversation. I always come out probably within about the first 10 minutes of our conversation, because that's one of the differences with being an invisible minority. As with people with neurodiversity and things of that nature, you have the option to disclose that. And I think that's where we all have that opportunity. I also always go into the definition of how we perceive diversity. And for us, and I learned this when I was teaching this kind of stuff at Disney, we play around with what's called the 5 layers of diversity by Garden Schwartz and Rowe, these 2 amazing women in the Los Angeles area. They said, you know what? There's a big definition on diversity and inclusion, specifically diversity. And what does that mean? And so they kind of organized it into 5 layers. You kind of think about it like a bullseye. And so they say, at the very core, and I actually happen to have a video or a visual if you're looking. But if you think about it, at the very core of all humans is our personality. No one will be the same. There'll only be one Trina. There'll only be one Steve, because of our personality and our experiences. So that's the core of what makes each individual unique. And then you say the next layer out is called the internal dimensions. And that's stuff that we often go to. And I kind of identify this with clients when I'm first working with them. And it's things like gender identity, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, physical ability, your chronological age. And for the most part, these really don't change throughout your lifetime. Obviously, your age changes and your physical ability could possibly change. But these are the ones that kind of stick around. And these are the ones where when I initially ask a client, how do you embrace diversity? Like, oh, we're good. We got blank month. It's like, oh, okay, good start. But, there's that. And then we start to go out to what's called the external dimensions. And these are things that by design will change, but they still influence how we look at the world. Things like, our income, our religion, our physical appearance, our habits, recreational, education, work. These sometimes change, and our appearance, for example, can change daily, but they still influence how we look at the world. And then Garden Schwartz and Rose say organizational dimensions. So now in the context of the business or the workplace or whatever. So, I'm in marketing, I'm in sales, I'm union affiliated, I'm not. I started doing the thing called legacy organization because I work with so many large corporations that M&As, mergers and acquisitions happen. And you see the cultural difference between company A who bought company B and how they kind of sometimes have almost this weird internal like turf war thing going on. But that, again, all looks at how you perceive the world and how you kind of react within it. And then their last thing is fairly new, actually, because it used to be 4 layers, now it's 5 layers. And they talk about country of operation. And so it's where you're physically located, how that impacts how you look at the world. So it's the values of that particular country, the political system, the language, the laws, the social structure, etc. And so I happen to work with a lot of German national enterprises for some reason. I don't know how that happened. I don't speak German, but I see the influence of the German culture within. And of course, you don't want to stereotype, but there's those commonalities like timeliness, for example.
Yes.
The German culture is gorgeously, and I'm this way as a person, gorgeously very structured in their time.
Yes.
And you see that permeate throughout the world in these different businesses. So I just always thought this was such a cool way to think about the concepts of diversity. And I always bring this up in our conversations because then people can start to relate. So the white folks in the room are like, oh, okay, I can kind of relate now because I'm a parent. And so you get them a little bit, then you start to help them understand. Obviously, some of these impact how we look at the world much bigger than other things. But, one last story, I was working with a client and they knew this. And they're a manufacturing client. And they were so excited because they had their product development team. And they're like, yes, we're so cool. We got all these different ethnicities and genders on our design team. I'm like, fantastic. Well, when they finally got to market with their widget, they realized they forgot a diversity facet. They forgot handedness. So they spent all this money creating this thing and forgot to see if there was a diversity of ability, meaning left-handed versus right-handed. Right. And if you were left-handed, you couldn't use this thing. And so they're like, oh, we tried. I'm like, you know what? That's okay. You were in the right genre. Now we know. Right. But I just think it's a cool way to think about the concept of inclusivity and what that looks like for all of us.
And that's very, very interesting and so true that not only is the inclusivity things as gender, race, sex, all that, it goes down to, like you said, left hand, right hand, and that's something that I never thought about. And probably most people don't, because that's not something that you just don't think about. I mean, and if you think about it, even growing up, it was, oh, you're a lefty. Oh, it was like some freak of nature because somebody was left-handed, and it's like, well, why? Why does it matter?
Someone asked me, they're like, why are there so many trans people all of a sudden? I said, you know what? It's just the same way as left-handedness. Because back in the day, as I date myself, and this was a little before my time, but I remember hearing stories where if you were a left-handed kid, they forced you to use your right hand. Yep. And so it's kind of the same way. Trans folks have always been there, but now we're starting to say, you know what? We're not going to force you. We're not going to make you go to only the right-sided desks you had as a kid. There are some left ones, and that's fine. And so it's not that like left-handed folks never existed until the 70s. Of course they did. And I'm not. This is not analogy being dismissive of our trans brothers and sisters. Of course not. But it's the same concept. But society finally said, you know what? Yes. We have been wrong. We need to acknowledge, and now that's why you're seeing a lot more folks have the courage and the opportunity to show their authentic selves as they truly are.
I love that. Yeah, and I'm dating myself because I am a child of the 70s.
Well, me too.
Oh my God. So let's talk about your book. I love the title. So Pride Leadership: Strategies for the LGBTQ plus leader to be the king or queen of the jungle.
Yes. So Pride Leadership came out, pun intended, in 2019. Yes, get it. Gay leadership book came out. So it's been in my head for quite a while. It's technically my 3rd book, but I'm at a conference in 2018. And I'm, between sessions, I'm sorting my little business cards, and this woman next to me is doing the same thing, and strike up a conversation. She's like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, consulting, leadership, blah, blah, blah. How about you?" She's like, "Well, I'm a publisher." I'm like, you know what? There's a leadership book in my head that needs to come out. Let's get that book out. And so that's kind of where I started down the path of organizing what I've seen really work in the workplace and what I've seen not work so well in the workplace for folks. And so started identifying things. And then I do a lot of volunteer work for advocacy, equality, especially for the LGBTQ community. And so do you remember Trina, Sex in the City?
Yes.
Okay, so Carrie Bradshaw, for those who don't know, was one of the main characters, and she was an author. And she always, at some point in every episode, opened up her little MacBook and would sit down and say, "I couldn't help but wonder," and that was kind of her thesis. And so I couldn't help but wonder, as I'm watching all of my queer brothers and sisters do their leadership stuff, if there's a difference in their opportunity to approach it. And so that's kind of what Pride Leadership led to. So I went from being a generic leadership book to one kind of through the rainbow lens, as you might say, to seeing, is there something about being a queer person and exercising your opportunity to look at these 6 leadership competencies. So I talk about authenticity, courage, empathy, communication, relationships, and culture. And yes, there's 6 because it makes a rainbow flag. Isn't that pretty? No, I just made, these are the top 6 I've seen over my 30 years in this space. But let's take authenticity, for example, since we talked about it a few moments ago. Contemporary research shows, again, if you're authentic in the workplace, people know, people trust you. And really the secret to good leadership is trust, period. You can take that away. I said, I could have one word in one page of my book and be trust, build trust, period.
Right.
But if I'm authentic in the workplace, like if I'm a gay man who's out, if I'm a trans woman who's being her authentic self in the workplace, that's power. And that power can be used for effective leadership. Let's just think about it maybe in a different way. And that's kind of where the concept of Pride leadership comes. A lot of my allies love it. It's solid leadership theory mixed with really awesome dad jokes. So it's been refreshing to write because it's non-academic, yay. But it's really helped folks, regardless, think about their own perspective through these 6 competencies and amp up their leadership awesomeness.
I love it. So I'm curious, your company, TopDog, you said you guys are very diverse in your makeup. What's your makeup?
So I use a lot of 1099 contractors. So that's been the fun thing about having been internal to like IBM and Disney, because people go on their merry way and you kind of keep ties with them, and a lot have gone on their own. So that's great. So it ebbs and flows, quite honestly. We are heavily on the female side. Just out of happenstance. We have several folks of color. There's, I think right now, 2 of us who identify as members of the LGBTQ community, but I'm open to all dogs, if you will. The breed doesn't matter, but I just want to make sure that we don't set it the balance off one way or another. So we're pretty good mix. And you can see that on the current website who's kind of playing in our doghouse right now.
Oh, I love that, playing in the doghouse.
Dog puns are easy when you have this business.
I love it. Okay, Steve. So we're getting ready to hit our questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Oh, see, you hesitated.
Oh, it's because I was getting water.
You hesitated. Don't blame it on the water. Okay, here we go. Who or what motivates you?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say I have a lot of intrinsic motivation. I'm really good at motivating myself because 3 years ago, I would have said, having a good living and impacting the world. Now it's like, I want to make a darn big ding in the universe on inclusivity. And so the best way to do that is to grow the business so that I have my army of awesomeness who are just really fostering inclusive leaders. So that's, I think, what drives my business and me personally.
What demotivates you?
Minutia and detail. I am a Myers-Briggs ENTJ, and that N, big picture thinker, is huge. And so my S-ness, where you like details, not my jam. That's why I have the awesome support staff that I have in my business who like that area.
Oh, when was a time that something was said or done to hurt you, but it worked for your good?
Well, I mean, I have been called the F word way too many times. I have a lovely scar on my face from being gay bashed. And I would say that I'm not going to lie, obviously that literally hurt and emotionally hurt, but it also said, you know what? to heck with this. The world's going to be better. And I'm going to show folks that this homosexual white boy can make an impact on inclusivity for all of us others. And I think that's kind of been the silver lining of some of those experiences.
Mm. What is your fear?
I'm afraid of letting my top doggers down. And that was actually one of my biggest fears during COVID, was because they're 1099 contractors, there's no formal, it's a contract. If the contract goes away, it is what it is. And so I think that was one of the hardest things during COVID was, the 3 contractors that I had lined up, because we usually set up our work for the entire year by February. Mm-hmm. And letting those folks down. They were, of course, lovely, and they came back and we added more folks, but just that uncontrollable way that I disappointed others was a bit of a challenge.
Mm. Is there a time when you wish you had done something that you didn't?
Oh, that's a lovely question. I have to say one of my superpowers is, typically speaking, going after what I want, or if it doesn't work out, to be reflective enough to say, you know what, that was something bigger than me, letting me know that, I thought I wanted it, but it really wasn't in my best interest. And I'm open enough to kind of look at things that way. But I would say probably I didn't pursue home ownership earlier than I should have, or I would have liked to have. Mm. But I'm married, so there's all that.
Mm. Is there a time that you wish you had not done something?
Time when I wish I had not done something. There are times early starting my business that I was like, what that insert whatever here am I doing with this? It's an economic downturn. I'm barely trying to make ends meet. And like, why am I doing this? Why am I not going and getting a quote unquote real job? Mm-hmm. And then you throw in, imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of folks in this world have that. And I think that's the opportunity is to get through that. And luckily I did, because, it's almost 14 years later but really getting through that and getting out of your own head so that you don't kind of fall victim to that imposter syndrome and some of those situational thoughts.
Mm. What is your definition of success?
I define success where you are making an impact on the world and you're leaving it better than you found it, all the while being able to support your family and those around you so that they can do their passion or their work as well.
How do you recharge?
My dog, I had 2. Unfortunately, my canine daughter passed away earlier this year. But I love my son, my canine son. Obviously, my husband, we've been together 23-ish years. So we're completely opposite in a wonderful way. And so he's been a fantastic support system. I do enjoy a bit of wine, especially if it's a chili by the fire pit and here in Central Florida. And I also love writing, and I didn't think I would, which funny that I have 3 books, but the first book was my dissertation, which was horrible. The second book I self-published, which for some people, they have great success. I did not, and it was not fun. The third book, I had like a real publisher and a whole, editorial staff. And I'm like, this is cool. And I find myself, I'm actually working on the next book now because I find it really enjoyable and fun.
What are you awesome at?
I am awesome at being silly. And I think that's a superpower given some heavier times or even heavier topics that we bring to the workplace. And diversity inclusion is stupidly passionate for me, but I also know that you can have a lighthearted approach to it so that others can approach it a little bit differently. And I get that from my father. He's one of the most awesome, silly men in the world. And I'm happy that I carry on his silliness into the next generation.
What legacy do you want to leave beside the silliness?
I was going to say silliness. I want folks to say, oh yeah, that gay leadership dude helped me think about things differently, or, opened my eyes to look at my own superpowers, whether I'm gay or straight, it doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of the legacy. I will share. I was, we just came back from holiday, and my husband and I were having a drink outside at this place, and this gentleman came up and he's like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Aren't you the gay leadership dude?" I'm like, "What?" And he'd seen one of my keynotes and actually read my book. I was like, oh my God, like that just warmed my heart. He said, can I take a selfie? I'm like, absolutely, tag me in it. And like that one, that's just very flattering. But
Right.
two, that means I'm making a difference.
Right.
People remembering, not just me, but the stories that I'm sharing and the empowerment I'm hopefully helping fan the flame in them. Because everyone has these powers. They just have to exercise them. And I think that's the legacy I'm hoping to continue to lead.
Oh, I love that story. Tell the listeners where they can find you, your website, how they can connect with you, if they want to do business with you. Give us the whole spiel.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. We finally got to the one-stop shop where you go to topdoglearning.biz. There you can find information about my top doggers, ways to get a hold of us. We're pretty active on the blog. So you can see some of the stuff out there. You can see stuff about my book, Pride Leadership, and the different ways you can consume that. Side note, you'll also get a link to the audiobook, which I have to say I proudly and painstakingly did myself. I was going to outsource it, but my producer, her and I were talking. I'm like, okay, I have a whole chapter on authenticity. That's kind of crappy if I outsource the whole thing and someone else is telling my dad jokes. So we did this at the beginning of COVID, and I actually had to do it on my own in the quietest place in my house, which of course was my closet. So my gay leadership book was read in the closet.
You know, I laugh hard because I actually read my own book too for the Audible version, and it is painful.
Painful.
You know, you like, oh, this is my book. I can read it. This will be fine. But man, and I think the day I wanted to do mine, my neighbor was having construction done. And I was just like, oh my God, you know, I'm putting all these blankets up. And
Yep. There's a picture of me in the closet with a dog bed over my head for sound dampening. So Trina, I can empathize with you.
Yeah, it's for you guys who don't know. Yeah, it is painful. All right, Steve, it's been a joy speaking with you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to, be here on Trina Talk with me.
This was lovely. And thank you for all the work that you do, Trina. I think it's super important stories that you're bringing to light and continue the awesome work.
I want to thank my guests for being on the show, and I want to thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and don't forget to tune in next week.